Okay, we are live now. Um, the nexus between religion and politics has always the need for constant interrogation. This is more so important in a country that is religious, yet very much underdeveloped. According to a survey by Gallup International, Nigeria is the second most religious country in the world, only behind Thailand. And one of the estimates by the Corporate Affairs Commission estimated that about 36,000 churches and 23,000 mosques are registered in Nigeria. So the numerical strength of churches and mosques is stronger than that of schools and hospitals combined. And the numerical strength of pastors and imams surpasses the combination of both doctors and teachers. And so, to borrow the words of Dr. Felix Akam, our guest today, the challenge now becomes how do we balance the need of teaching not just the scriptures, but the alphabet, of proclaiming not just the gospel, but equally reciting the national anthem, of giving not just Holy Communion for the soul, but also earthly bread for the body, of raising not just saints, but also social pioneers, of teaching both the value of prayer and the necessity of work, of combining divine providence with a planned social security. Today, we have the honor of featuring the guest speaker, Reverend Father Dr. Felix Uche Akam. Dr. Felix is a priest of God and is a summa cum laude graduate of philosophy, mass communication, and theology. He further did his postgraduate studies in journalism, education, and accountancy, and holds a PhD from the University of Freiburg, Germany. Over the years, Dr. Felix has been a journalist, a research student in media hermeneutics, a public affairs commentator, and an advocate of the masses. Dr. Felix, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it is my pleasure, Gochuku. Thanks for having me around.
Okay, let's dive right in. First of all, let's explicate the terms of discussion for our audience. What is religion and what is politics?
Yeah, well, the idea of religion is something that is quite very obvious that because the religion has to do that we are not just people living in the world, we have this spiritual yearning. And then the religion is something that connects us with this spiritual being, that we are not just only a being that thinks, but also a being that transcends. So simply put, religion is an act that offers satisfaction for this inner feeling which every man has. And then politics, on the other hand, when you look at it, is simply an art of governance. And here are we, as I will later specify, when you read Michel Foucault, you have to understand how politics revolves around the sovereign, disciplinary power, and then governmentality. This will be the point we'll be trying to understand, to realize that religion and politics is just all about governance, but with different spheres, uh, looking at the spiritual and then looking at the temporal.
Wow, amazing. That's a beautiful juxtaposition. But Nigeria has the largest Christian population in Africa and equally the largest Muslim population in sub-Saharan Africa. But some figures pegged it at 48.3% of Nigerians are Christians, while 48.9% are Muslims. Whereas some figures said it's 51.4% are Christians, while 48% are Muslims. But the difference in figure don't need to detain us. Predicated on this backdrop, how Nigeria too is equally the poverty capital of the world, even though it has this high number of religious adherents. So, can it be said that religion has contributed in underdeveloping us?
Well, I wouldn't be quick to say that because this is just like asking between hen and egg, which is older. Because ordinarily that this yearning in man, that we yearn to fill a gap in us. And because our nature abhors vacuum, whenever there is a vacuum, there is always a factor that steps in to fill that vacuum. And I think there is a gap in governance. And when there is gap in governance, when there is crisis in governance, people, what do? They retreat. They retreat to the local spheres where they exercise influence. And when before you know is some of the structures that already exist in cultures, structures that exist in religion could easily be manipulated. It is simply a failure of institution of governance that is bringing religion into the equation of the crisis in Nigeria. That is the way I would understand it. And because, of course, when this failure, the failure of governance is total, because the governance was completely collapsed, people are now looking for a sense of fulfillment, something that offers them hope. And this is where religion first comes in as a tool to offer people hope. But along the line, a kind of people I would prefer to describe as maybe religious entrepreneurs saw this act of offering hope as something that could be exploited. And they immediately stepped in. And they are stepping into this industry is the mess we are all witnessing today. And then we have become a country that is not only economically crucified, but religiously vulnerable. And that is the fact we are seeing today. And on the other hand, the exploitation is coming both from within and from without. From within, there are merchants, traders who stepped into worship industry. And what was an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur is someone who offers people what they need at his own gain. Now, these pastors know these people have spiritual needs. They have economic need, something that good governance could have supplied. But the inability of the good governance, because governance is about making available the resources, privileges, and rights among the members of a given society. But when the privileges and burdens are not rightly distributed, there is going to be a lack. And good governance doesn't mean that you must meet the need of the people, but the good governance presumes there must be equity, there must be justice in allocation of privileges and burdens. And when you look at a country like Nigeria, the failure, which is the prevalence of injustice, could not allow this society to function normal. Now, when that failure came in and people retreated to religion as something that promises them the other world, now from within, religion started having problems. The industrialists entered into the industry and began exploiting the vulnerability of these people whom I said are economically crucified. And as they were exploiting this vulnerability, they were exploiting the little they have in exchange for a promise that will never come. And with the philosophy of the law shall provide, which I would say is a lazy man's philosophy, people key into this ideology. And when they continue to exploit, this is now the rot coming from within. Now, from without, religion became a tool to be politically manipulated. That the bourgeoisie, the ruling class, they need to maintain the status quo because the abnormality in the status quo is to the good of the ruling class, and it must be maintained at all costs. Now, when I was talking before, I made reference to Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault says power and control functions at 3 levels. The number 1 level is the level of the sovereign. And the level of the sovereign is here. The power of the ruler is not questioned. The ruler is absolute. And it is this sovereign rulership that we have in Nigeria. The sovereign, the president says it all. The electoral bill goes to the presidency. The presidency, in his own individual judgment, will survey the will of 109 senators, representing the generality of more than 200 million people. And when you look at this thing now, so this is the typical power of the power of the sovereign. And then you come to the second stage of power. And the power here is power and control. And how do you exercise it? Then you come to the disciplinary power. Disciplinary power is where the government functions through disciplinary institutions like the prison, like the police, and some other institutions that control behavior within a social contract. Now, when religion was exploited, this second aspect, disciplinary power, government started using its own disciplinary institutions to monitor religion. And this is part of what we are witnessing. And now there is a third level of power that is called governmentality, which is self-governance. In this level of power, this is the level of power that is being exploited from within, where people within the religion are working for the good of those exploiting the religion from within, and are also listening to the sensationalism being invoked from outside. So from within and from without, the religion in Nigeria has become a tool of exploitation. But it is not at the same time the cause of our underdevelopment, but rather a symptom of our underdevelopment.
Wow, this is a deeper level of demystification of that concept. Okay, according to our constitution, section 10 of the 1999 constitution, the government of the federation of the state shall not adopt any religion as a state religion. So how does this square with a country where some states openly practice Sharia law, and also where some governors dedicate huge sums of the budget to build ecumenical centers and fund pilgrimages to Mecca or to Jerusalem with state funds? Even to an extent that there was a time when the CBN was mandated to sell dollar at the rate of 180 naira per dollar to pilgrims going to Mecca, as against 360 naira per dollar that people buy from the public domain. So how does this section of the constitution, where it is thoroughly stated that the government of the federation shall not adopt any religion as a religion, bears in comparison with the attitude we have in the Nigerian system?
Yeah, well, when we come to Nigerian constitution, sometimes I prefer not talking about it, because Nigerian constitution is just a pamphlet that exists in principle but doesn't exist in practice. Because we are not like trying to, the whole document is very bogus and written with a religious optics. And when beyond the errors contained therein, even the good that one could identify in the Nigerian constitution cannot be implemented. And now you are not talking about the adherence of some governors, the same constitution that was meant as a social contract between the governed and the governors. And then how some of the policies of the government are targeted to favor a particular religion, and how the resources meant for the people are also used to fund religion. Yeah, both positions could be defended, but it depends on who has the spiritual argument. One will say that a government that is building religious center for the people is also caring for the people, because the people here should not be understood as simply, material. We are also spiritual beings. So to take proper care of the people, we should also take proper care of both their material and their spiritual being. But the problem is, this is where priority comes in. What is the priority? We should not be looking at heaven for what we can do for ourselves. I may be a church goer, and by the way, I am a priest. But I should not be, I should learn how not to look from heaven what I know for sure is not there. And when you look at this, you now ask, is the priority the building of the church in a country where people don't have anything to eat? Is the priority caring for the spiritual when the material, the physical is dying? And this is where we're going to fund the policy of building a community center with a fund meant for the citizens. People who have no hospitals are told to go and pray. But on the other hand, you understand that it is part of the exploitation that I'm talking about. What type of exploitation? It is the exploitation to invade the mentality because they are trying to understand what makes people emotional. Our religious mentality has been activated to the highest level. And whenever anybody touches it, you see, emotion run high. Somebody will say, why are you against building a house for God? Why are you this? And then you begin to ask yourself, established democracies, are they thriving on the cathedrals built in their different cities? The answer is no. We are not in any way denigrating the power of the spiritual. And like I said, and true to my profession, which I've remained faithful to, I have spiritual needs and I have also physical needs. But how can God, it is only a wicked God that would like to live in a temple while the people suffer. You remember, when we take Christianity, for instance, the tragedy of Christianity is the tragedy of Good Friday. In every other religion, people die for their God. But in our own religion, God died for the people. Which means that the God of Christianity is a caring God. It is not a God who will be sleeping while people are suffering. It is God who will be resting in a cathedral while people are homeless and sleeping on the streets. It is not God who will want a communal center where there is no unity, where people are fighting. Different confessions are not at unity. And by the way, what is ecumenical about it? No church agrees that the other is the right way. And since this ecumenism started, what has it achieved in Nigeria? Nothing. It is all politics of hunger. And now you are talking about devoting part of the national resources to promote a particular religion. When you look at the 1999 Constitution, people who have taken time to look at this will tell you that so many times Sharia is mentioned in this constitution that was meant to be a constitution to guide a secular society. And there is no mentioning of a church. And that is very strange. And that is exactly one of the things people will say, that constitution is simply something that should be done in the dustbin. So that is what I'm going to say, that no, it is as bad as you say, that the question doesn't even rise whether it should be done. The question should be, how are we going to come out of it?
Okay. So, well, it's like a backdrop of the last question you answered. How useful is it to pray for development? Some political leaders are quick to claim that they are fulfilling God's wish, especially when they do whatever they do as politicians, and so that it is God that made them to be elected as officials, and so the responsibility for their performance, whether they failed or they succeed, are usually laid at the feet of God rather than their own personality. Just like you once said, in Germany, candidates campaign posters, carry inscriptions like taking over responsibility. But here in Nigeria, it is divine mandate. And so whenever the leader fails, it becomes a question of ascribing everything to God. So how useful is it for citizens or people to engage in prayers or whatever for development?
Like I earlier said, that the Lord shall provide is a lazy man's philosophy. How can the Lord provide for you when the Lord has given you hands to work? And not long ago, I said that you might be a Christian and be a philosopher, but what will make you different is that you will learn how not to seek from heaven what God has given you power to do. And
Amen.
governance, I did reiterate not long ago, is simply utilizing available resources. I didn't say sufficient resources, available resources to cater for the people within a geographical setting and under whom you are taking care of. Now, when you look at this particular incident, whether praying, it is already a sign of failure when you are coming to national development and you're channeling the energy to pray. To pray over what? To pray that God will do what? Construct road. And it is, my problem might not be that people are praying, but the prayer is not being matched with corresponding actions. Because the answer, when we talk about praying in the church, we talk about to walk and pray, and not to pray and walk. And even if you should misplace this priority and you pray and you walk, but to pray alone is already a sign that you have nothing upstairs. Praying for a national development, gathering people to pray for the development of a nation is the biggest scam that exists in Nigerian democracy. And it is so unfortunate that some of us, men of God, have came into this mentality. This mentality is very destructive because this mentality is arrogating. Why don't we elect God to be our leader? Why do we kill to elect people who should lead us? If God should now be coming down to solve the problems he has given us hands to solve, it is simply lack of initiative. A good leader in his private moments will ask God for wisdom to come up with the policies that will benefit his people. He will ask people to pray for him. He will ask people to come up because God has been speaking through individuals who have different views, divergent view on what is happening in the society. But when these people come up and they present this divergent view, they are seen as critics. They are people to be hunted after. So how else does God appear? God appears in form of a man to talk to you, to say, look, you have an argument, I have an argument, present it, then we settle for the spiritual argument. But when you reject a spiritual argument and you are asking God to send you help, what type of help are you looking for? It is either you are mad or you are about to run him mad. And no other way to talk about it.
Uh-huh. Okay. Um, though you have said it repeatedly here, but it is worth reiterating. Maybe relying on Karl Marx, who said that religion is the opium of the masses. Some analysts have said that the two most destructive elements in the Nigerian society are political dispossession and religious oppression. How true or false is this claim?
Political disposition and religious oppression. I think the greatest thing that has happened, the bane of underdevelopment, is the erosion, inversion of our thinking faculty. We have lost the ability to think for ourselves. And that loss is consequential because there is a kind of a historical amnesia that is following most Nigerians. And it is like our inability to look back to understand what has been happening in our history. We read history, we see things that happen, but we go with the wish that it can never happen to us. That is for the leaders. And for our people, the people who follow them have refused to learn from history. They have been fooled and fooled again. And the same politicians have continued to stew on their Jews. Why? Because they presented a mind. So, the greatest thing we are suffering is the problem of gullibility. Gullibility is the reason for political dispossession and the reason for religious oppression. Because when you are gullible, you become malleable and you do the bidding of whoever is willing to manipulate you. You have become vegetative in thinking and you are kept in a position where the person wants to keep you. And because this thinking ability has been taken, literally taken, we now carry empty skulls on the streets. We are busy discussing things that can never change our situation. We have learned like there is no mispriority is reigning. That people are begging on the social media not to do something meaningful, but to go out on a date. It is a sin for somebody who is not earning to go on, eating at the eateries. So it is part of it. So we are not going to take political dispossession and religious oppression as something. We should ask the question, why are they possible? Otherwise, we continue to treat the symptoms without looking at the jobs. My idea is simple. You see, we are always called to be good Samaritans. Right. Every time we are preaching good Samaritan, but nobody asks question. Why can't we make every road leading from Jericho to Jerusalem safe so that people traveling will no longer be waylaid? If people are not waylaid, nobody will call you. There will be no attack, and then there will be no call to be a good Samaritan. When we extend opportunities to people, not out of charity, but because we believe that it is the shortest route to our common good, then we will no longer be posting videos of where we are helping widows. When you give widows, clothes, food, why don't you work on their mindset to understand that widowhood is not victimhood, to understand that widowhood is not dispossession, but they have created a kind of victimhood mentality in so many people. And this victimhood mentality is the reason why everybody is now like, I am to receive. You see, the problem we have, initially I told you that the failure of governance was a total failure. That failure of governance has also meant that the citizens expect more from the government, more than the government can give, even in a Western world. We have forgot that government is something that is even collective. And it is simply because of the failure of the government to do what they needed to do initially. And now, it is like government is responsible for everything. But in principle, when we are sincere and we want to solve Nigeria's problem, we will realize that government will only be responsible for 30%. But the mind
Mhm.
has been invaded, and we need to recall the mind back. Drop it there.
Okay. So let me just take you to religion and morality. How indispensable is religion to morality? Or maybe rather, does being religious equate to being moral? Or in a broader term, what's the relationship between religion and morality? Because Nigeria is very religious, but I don't think we can call our nation a moral nation.
Well, being religious and being moral, first of all, one asks, what is being moral? Being moral is just a matter of right and wrong. And how does a society begin? A society begins when you need something and I need exactly what you need. And then there will be a clash of interests. Now, the society begins when we too agree to lay down our needs, submit it, and give it to somebody to manage for us. And at that point, there will be a kind of a rule of engagement. And this rule of engagement, which is the code of behavior, is the foundation of the social contract. And our ability to hold on to the terms of this social contract will make us moral beings in this society. Now, when you talk about religious morality drives from the spiritual being which a particular religion invokes. Because every religion has a concept of a transcendent being, a being that is not seen. And the ability of this being not to be seen gives this being a special priority, a special privilege. And this priority makes this being to have a total control over us. Now, a being that controls you gives you order because that being is sovereign. That being has disciplinary power. And the disciplinary power will be will be what that being uses to discipline us to ensure the order within the kingdom of this transcendent being. Now, you can belong to a class without learning anything being taught. I can be a Christian by name, but not in behavior. And Aristotle will tell you that a name ought to be functional. When a name is not functional, then that thing is a name in vain. But when a name is functional, the name should follow a being. And that name following a being will mean that the action of that being will proceed from the name the being that being has. Then to be a Christian means that my action must proceed from the tenets of Christianity. And here I will say Christian morality and no longer religious morality. So that is the connection I would want us to understand in that direction. So now, when you look at the country, now the understanding of this transcendent being is also a subject of controversy. Even within Christendom, there are people you see as the fundamental Christian. There are people who will say, even when you talk about power, when you talk about religion, politics, there are two groups that must be avoided. The first group is the group I will rather call separationists. Separationists say there must be a total separation between religion and politics. Like, it sounds somehow. Then the second group will be the fusionists, which say that religion and politics must come together closely. But that one is also not good. Now, These two extremes, the fusion, the separation, they are destructive to Christianity and disaster to politics. Because there is a dichotomy being created within one being that has two needs, the social needs and the temporal and the religious needs. When you create this dichotomy within a being, and the first character of a being is unity. When a being is divided within, then that being, the actions are not united. And then there will be discrepancies. So both philosophically, sociologically, religiously, and otherwise, it does not hold water to separate. But it goes to say that it's very easy for one to belong to a group without really being a true adherent of that group. Just as Lucifer was also in the league of angels, but his allegiance to God was not total, and he becomes a symbol of disobedience. And this symbol of disobedience is the reason for another kingdom if we are going by the story or the biblical theology.
Okay. Just on that, your colleague, Father George Ewusiani, once said that people have been schooled in a Christianity that even the apostles would not recognize. He said that with the number of churches and ministers of God in Nigeria, we should have been a transformed society. Do you share the sentiment that Nigeria's brand of religion is anti-development?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it is, it depends on what one means by development, because I would say that our own concept of religion could also be, it's not anti-development, but it ensures the development of underdevelopment. So it is also another form of development. I would rather say that our own brand of Christianity is not really a Christianity that is in accordance with the biblical theology. And then one thing about Christianity is when you understand that when Christianity was incorporated into the Western governance, way back to the time of Constantine, the biblical values, that is the gospel values, values of peace, values of justice, these values were incorporated into the Western democracy, and they became the bedrock of Western politics. Such that these Christian values, the gospel truths, transformed the Western politics and sieved out things that are not in accordance. So when people talk about Christianity, secularism today, secularism is not simply something that doesn't have root in the gospel. Secularism is simply a high, the highest climb where this thing has ascended to. So our own brand of democracy, our own brand, in order not to digress from your question, our own brand of religion is very strange, but it is not totally out of it. You see, when you read history to Western history, I mean now, you understand that at the time they found themselves in this stage we are today. There were times religion was used to commit a lot of horror. There were times there were fights between Catholicism and Protestantism. All these things, they are stages. But what worries us is that we have dwelt at this stage for a very long time. And now we are asking ourselves, how do we get out of here? Our own brand of democracy, our own brand of religion is simply a function of the society where we have found ourselves. And that is what is happening today.
Okay. Thank you for that kind of decision I try to bring with regard to our brand of Christianity and where it has led us. But across the world, we see religion as a tool for inspiration. You can see religion helping people, inspiring people to lift one another, to do charity, to feed the hungry, care for the poor, comfort the afflicted, and strive for peace. We see religion, pushing people to do the right thing. But on the other hand, we still see religion being distorted and twisted and used as an instrument of hate, an instrument of oppression, of disposition people, and trying to perpetrate violence and terror. Even some terror groups have religion at their background of why they do what they do. They stand up to profess faith. You see ISIL, you see them orchestrating brutal and vicious deaths and barbaric attitude and all that. So now, how do we reconcile these two divergent realities stemming from the same source and stemming from religion? The profound good that we see, helping people to do good, do the right thing, take care of the sick, and inspire others. And then the evil that we see in terms of terrorism, killings, barbarism, all in the same name of religion.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question. You talked about religion being a victim of varied interpretations. Radicalism has been as old as the world itself, to the extent that even Jesus Christ had among his apostles a man named Simon the Zealot. He was very zealous about so many things. You see, one of the greatest undoings is turning religion into a systematic body of language. When religion was turned into a systematic body of language, there was an effort to make it a science. And one thing about science is everybody continues to make inputs. Everybody now, it depends on how you see it. And that word, it depends, now is a word of limitation. It gives eyes to things, to think things differently. The liberty of thought comes in here. And when religion was birthed as a body of knowledge, people started thinking it like they think under sciences. But the religion was meant, you see, to be something spiritual. But people started, like God gave 10 commandments, and the people multiplied it to 613 precepts. Just 10 commandments. And even these 10 commandments were reduced by Jesus Christ to 2, love of God and love of neighbor. Now the multiplication gives room for varied interpretations. It has happened not only in Islam, it has also happened in Christianity. So, and then you ask, how do we know a good religion will not be against the people, will not be anti-life, will not be anti-society, will not be anti-God? Because if, like Jesus will say, a kingdom that is divided against itself cannot stand. So you know the value of something by the message that thing is propounded. So the test of validity is the message. Is this message promoting harmony? Is this message promoting peace? Is this message anti-people? And this is the reason why we have different interpretations. So the answer is very clear. And the answer is going back to those things God itemized in the Decalogue, going back to the teaching of Christ to know what Christ said, notwithstanding how people have come to interpret what Christ said down the history. So that is my answer to that. So religion
Okay.
is neutral until you act on it.
Wow. Okay. A question from some of our audience. You know, they ask, how can we disintegrate the idea of disintegrate the idea of looking at power from the top when we can access knowledge and wisdom to develop our nation from anywhere. In other words, how can we remove the idea that power has come from the top when we can access wisdom and knowledge for development anywhere?
Yeah, if I have understood that question very well, uh, the the question is about how can we stop looking up when what we could easily get from down. Like how can we this up here is understood as God. Like how
Yeah.
do we do away with the mentality of the law shall provide? And I still remain faithful to my earlier view that the law shall provide philosophy is a lazy man's philosophy. Because we, you know, there is what I would call a politics of rhetoric. When you look at certain things, the power of the rhetoric to shape the mind is very powerful. It cannot be underestimated. Rhetoric is used for securitization. Rhetoric is also used for desecuritization. When I begin to use the rhetoric that Nigeria is free, and I use it frequently and frequently, it begins to ring in the mind of the people, and you begin to perceive Nigeria as a safe and peaceful country. That is the power of rhetoric. I can also desecuritize Nigeria. Rhetoric shape our perception. And this rhetoric, this religious rhetoric of the law shall provide, is now shaping the mentality of the people. So the first of all is for us to watch our utterances, the expression we use before the people. That is the first way of making them not to look up. Even in the course of writing the development of Christianity, a time came when Paul, after preaching, a community in Thessalonica started waiting every morning for the second coming, and Paul had to write again. There is no food for a lazy man. You should go and work. The coming of the Lord is not imminent as you thought. The coming of the Lord is something that we come in a way we do not expect, not something its date has been fixed. So rhetoric is a way of now not looking up. Now, knowledge and wisdom can come from anywhere. Yeah, knowledge and wisdom can come from anywhere, but the knowledge and wisdom can also be taught. Of course, when we go, but that will be going too far. What I will rather call a kind of environmental epistemology, where the environment, the forces in the environment will be the cause of what we have. Like the society that didn't have Android technology, their reasoning was different. And McLuhan Marshall, a media theorist, said that the medium is the message. The medium is the message that the introduction of a particular technology in any society determines how people think. And it's not the use, it's the message, but the medium. Such that in Android society, it is not just he who has the Android that thinks differently, but he who lives in a society with an Android technology thinks differently. So knowledge and wisdom can come from anywhere. That is quite clear. So to disintegrate it, we have to teach people the real Christianity, We have to teach people the real Islam, not a political Islam, not an economic Christianity. Because now what we have is a political Islam and economic Christianity, where Christianity is being exploited for economic gain, and then Islam is being exploited for expansionist reason, and people are buying into this ideology.
Okay. Another question from the audience. It says that is on the issue of tithing. That Malachi 3:10 says that bring you all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in my house, and prove me now herewith, says the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So, how true is it to say that tithing is the root to individual prosperity? And if you stretch it too, since if individuals are prosperous, then the country will be prosperous. How true is it to say that tithing is necessary for a national prosperity?
You know, when you go to the bank, you are given a sheet to fill, and then it is really bold that you can easily fill in between the lines. But under it, there are conditions. And then as soon as you sign, they say terms and conditions apply. Nobody reads the terms and conditions. But whenever you are signing any document in the bank, and the bank requires that you append your signature, never you in your mind think that it is to your own benefit. It is simply to the benefit of the bank. When people begin to preach about this tithing, they have mixed one fundamental question. What was the rule when all these things were written? How were the priests cared for in the society that promoted this type of thinking? When you read the Bible, there are certain things in the Bible that we're connected with the social structure of the moment. And you cannot hold on to them. And one of them is tithing. Because the priests, this was a theocracy where the priest didn't only assume temporal but also spiritual power, and where the priest had no land to cultivate. It was an agrarian society where the priest devoted his time in the temple, offering sacrifices from burnt offering to everything there is. Now, there was a sense in making provisions for these people who devoted their time to cater for the society. But in a society where the priest has other things to do, then the same rule should not be applied. It is for the people now to look, to see how best, looking at the conditions and situation in a particular place, to know how the priest should be remunerated, and not specification. And when you go into the real tithing and you understand the Hebrew theology, you notice that what we're even calling tithe in Nigeria is even a disgrace of the stereotype that once existed. So I do not subscribe to the idea that tithing is the cause of blessing, and its withdrawal is the cause of curse. No, it is something that depends on the individual mind to do, to donate as this person. There are occasions where you can even provide more than what tithe should have stipulated. And if you stick to tithe, then even our charity will be impaired, because our charity will now be reduced to a body of language, which I told you that the greatest harm that has ever happened was simply turning this religion into a science that is now being measured even with a mathematical accuracy of 10%, called tithe. And this is one of them.
Wow. Okay, just like a final question before we go. Is there any way, or is it possible for we as a country to leverage our excessive religiosity as established by some research is done? Is there any way we can leverage our excessive religiosity for national development?
Completely. That is the only way forward. The only way forward is to do good. And that is what every religion teaches. And if we can agree to do good. But the problem here is if you want me to do good, even the pastor wants the congregation to do good, the good that he himself is not willing to do. Everybody wants everybody to do good except him or herself. The only way we can leverage on this for national development is the thing about Christianity, for instance, is that Christianity is a religion that teaches brotherly love and love of God. If we love our neighbor, we will not steal what is meant for the people. If we love our neighbor, we will not rob. If we love our neighbor, we will not steal or sell mandates. If we love our neighbor, we will share available resources equitably. Those things are in the Bible. And the Bible doesn't only provide this, but even goes on to specify how these things can be done. So certainly, religion as a tool of cohesion should have been for the ordering of the society. When you ask yourself, religion is closely related to politics, and they have been functioning. It was only in 1648 at the Treaty of Westphalia that there was a separation. And the separation here wasn't a total separation. Like when you read a document from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, that they say that the separation between church and state does not require in any way division between belief and perception or public action. It shouldn't in any way, or a kind of division between moral principle and political choices. So when we fall back to this, the thing Christian religion does is to ensure the integrity of a being. And this integrity of the being is guaranteed at the center of existence of that being, which is the spiritual aspect of the being, the transcendental aspect. If you go by the preposition of the metaphysicians. So if you guarantee this authenticity, guarantee the uniqueness of this particular being, now relating it to religion, then it is a perfect way to go forward in talking, in moving our people forward. Because we have to live well here before we think about a world we don't even know whether it exists.
Wonderful. Let's live well in our world before we talk about going to the other world. Okay. Is there any final words you have for our audience?
Well, my final word to the audience is, in our Nigerian language, we say, if move for guy man go chop. Most of these things happening today is I will tell our people to religiously shine their eyes because things are happening. All these churches that are proliferating here and there, none of those proliferation has anything good. Every of them has come to set a particular economic agenda of a group of people forming them. Nowhere you go, bend down and do what you should do and leave the rest. And I end, the Lord shall provide is a lazy man's philosophy. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you so much for coming to our show. And this is a show where we feature people with we call everyday heroes who have had good results from different areas to teach us the way to live better and improve our own lives. Sharing from their wealth of wisdom and experience which they have garnered over the years. And fortunately, we've had Dr. Felix Akam today. and we are very grateful for that. So for those who are going to watch later, go ahead and finish up the video and click the subscribe button so as to get up notifications for future editions. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Father Akam.
Yeah, it is a pleasure, Gochuku. Thank you and God bless you too.
Amen. Thank you. All right.